All right, let's get started. So I am going to use 4mm cable needles, and I like using 2 sets of shorter needles, but you can use one longer cable and use the magic loop method. You're going to need some double pointed needles of the same size as your needles. These are for the thumb. You don't have to use these shorter ones. You can use whatever length, but you do need some double pointed needles for that. For the thumb. And scissors, obviously, always for knitting projects. And I like to use some thicker cotton yarn as stitch holders for the thumbs. So you'll need a couple of those, or whatever stitch holders you have, and some kind of wool needle to get those on there, and also to weave in your ends when you're all finished. That's it. Oh gosh, and yarn. You're going to need some yarn, maybe 2 cakes. I have a couple of 2 cakes of the same size, 2 balls. You can buy 1 ball, obviously, and use a scale to separate it in 2 equal balls. If you don't have that, maybe you can do that at the yarn store before you leave. Some will do that for you. I'm going to use some hand spun ends, leftover bits that I have, make some colorful mitts. And the first time I made 2 at a time mitts, I used different colors to keep them separate, which really helped me. So I'm going to do that today for you. I'm going to start off with 1 brown and 1 gray. All right, let's get started. So grab one of your needles, and you can use whatever cast on method you prefer for a ribbed edge. Backwards loop is probably a bit tight. I use the knitting cast on method. All right, so here we go. I got one little thing on there, my first stitch, and I put the second needle in like I'm going to knit, wrap it like a knit, pull it, but instead of slipping that stitch off, I'm going to pull that a bit longer and then put the other needle in. And that's how we knit cast on. Because of the weight of my yarn, it's kind of like a worsted. I think I'm going to do 16 stitches. 18, 16. I like to do even numbers. So that my ribbing is even going around. I mean, on one side. Knit, purl, knit, purl. I like to end on a purl. Obviously, if you do both sides uneven, rather odd stitches, you're going to end up with an even number, but you should be following your pattern. So we're going to put half the stitches. Where am I at? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. Oh, okay, let's do 18. Do 18. 17. 18. Okay. So that's half of the first mitt. So I'm just going to slide those over, and I'm going to grab my second yarn, do my little loopy knot, pop that on there, and get 18 of these stitches on here. good thing I'm not a fast knitter. You guys can follow right along with me. Pull that a bit too far down. You can tell with the hand spun, sometimes it's, look at how thick that is there. Thick and thin, thick and thin. Oh, makes it a bit less slippery. But it also makes it nice in your garment when you've got thicker and thinner parts. I mean, gosh, it depends on what you like, right? Okay, where are we at here? I lost count. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17. Look at it is there. 18. Okay, gosh, I'm going to count that again. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. Okay, 18 and 18. So that is the first needle, the first half we've got there. 18 and 18. So now I'm going to grab my second needle because I'm going to head back now and do the other side. So I'm going to create one stitch, and then I'm going to turn this around because I want to head back and make a loop. I want to end up where I began. I'm going to slide the first set of stitches onto the bendy part here, which is going to make it more pliable and easier for me to do these second set. Okay, grab my other needle and head back. Now, any of you who have done in the round knitting know that sometimes when you're joining, there's an odd sort of gap or indentation in the knitting, and if that doesn't bother you, then great. You can just do the same amount of stitches on both sides. But what I like to do is on this second needle, I like to add one extra stitch, and then the first round of knitting, I will knit those two stitches together. The last stitch of the second needle and the first stitch of the first needle. And I'm going to show you, I'll show you that once I start knitting. But I'm explaining that now because I'm going to put an extra stitch here. Instead of 18, I'm going to put 19. I feel like I should be there. Never mastered the art of talking and counting at the same time. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17, 18, 19. I know this sounds crazy, but I'm going to count those again. There was a fat one there. Yeah, 2, 4, 6, 8. That's one stitch. 12, 14, 16, 18, and there's my extra one. So that's that one mitt right there, the second one, the cast on. Now what I'm going to do is pick up my gray, but before I do that, I need to make the first stitch. So here you can see I pop it into the last stitch on the other cable, and I knit myself a stitch onto the needle, and then I turn it, and I'm just gonna pop it right on where it needs to be, onto the other needle there. So here we go. 19 gray stitches on here. Six, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17, 18, 19. Okay, that's our cast on. Right there. Looks good. So now we're going to start knitting in the round. And anyone who's knit in the round, you know, you grab your closest needle and push it right up there, get your stitches on there, and then grab the other side of that same needle. Before we do that, I just want to show you, we've got two parallel needles going on here. It's important that your yarn is in the back. And I'm going to do that with this one as well. I'm going to put this in the back because sometimes if your yarn is in the wrong place when you are coming around, oh gosh, sorry about that. It creates another stitch in between here, which is what we don't want. So make sure that your yarn is in the back. Okay. So grab the first stitch, and I'm going to take this last stitch without twisting it, and I'm going to put it on this first needle. Okay, so I just took it off of there. I'm just going to put it right on that first needle there. And then I'm going to get rid of this so it's easier. Okay, so I'm going to knit these first two together. Easy. And then I'm going to purl. Now anytime you're doing knitting in the round, sleeves, socks, whatever, you know on the second stitch you give a little tug, and that's going to prevent any kind of sagging of yarn in between. So purl, and then we're just going to knit purl. We're doing the cuffs of the mitts. Knit purl, knit purl, knit purl, knit purl. Does it help when I say it? Knit purl. Okay, that's always good when you end on a purl. So now I'm going to drop that gray yarn. I'm going to keep my needles close. Okay, I'm going to put this yarn in behind, and this one's the first one is just a bit tricky because now obviously we can't slide this off the end here. So what I'm going to do is pretend that I'm sliding it off and putting it on here, and I'm going to knit into it like I've done that, and then on the other side I'll just drop it. Okay, so it's a bit tighter, there we go. Knit, second stitch, give a little tug, and that's it. We're gonna knit purl across here. Little splash of orange there, yeah. That's another thing I like about hand spun yarn is you never know what you're gonna get. Every now and then you get it. Oh, there's some orange too. Boom. All right, knit, purl. Okay, so we've just done our first row of ribbing. Okay, so now I'm going to turn the work, again keeping the yarn in the back, and grab the action and the needle that's closer to me. This first one's always a bit tight because it's the cast on. And we're going to do the same going back. Okay, so knit one stitch, purl the next stitch, but before we purl that, yeah, that one actually had a bit. Pull that tighter, not super tight, just you're just pulling up the slack. You don't want to make it so tight that when you come back the next time, it's hard to get your needle in. Purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, okay, knit, purl, and oh look, we have one extra. That's from the other side, so I'm just gonna let that go. Oh, it feels dangerous, but that's okay. We grabbed it at the beginning of the last round. Okay, let's push this up on here. Grab our yarn, and same thing. We're going to knit purl across, and because we were able to actually take the oh, here we go, second stitch, pull it a bit tight, knit purl, because we were actually able to take that first stitch off, right off the needle in the beginning. This one is not going to have an extra stitch. So does that make sense? Sort of closing up the gap with the extra cast on. We still have the right amount of stitches, but we have a nicer seam in between the beginning and the end. Knit, purl, knit, purl. Okay, that's it. So that's the first round. And you can see it's actually starting to look like mitts. Okay, maybe not yet. Circles. So pull that through. Keep our yarn in the back. Turn the work. And see how I keep this in the back here. And this in the back. Sometimes this gets wrapped around and then you end up having an extra stitch. That happens really easily, actually. So it's good to just make sure that your yarn is in between the cables and in the back, like that one. Yeah. So you can probably go from here. Knit purl across, knit purl across, and then the back. knit, purl, knit, purl. And I'm gonna leave you there to continue on with the ribbing, and the next video will pick up at the end of the ribbing. So however many rows of ribbing you want to do that, and then we'll get back together. Excellent. See you soon. Hey, thanks for watching. If you found this content valuable, please help me out and like the video, subscribe to my channel, and share it with everybody. Emails, Facebook, spread it out into the world. Thank you.